I'd like to call this June 25th, 2020 Budget Workshop special call meeting of the Board of Trustees of the San Felipe Del Consolidated Independent School District to order. This meeting is being conducted by video conference in accordance with the governor's authorization concerning suspension of certain open meeting law requirements for COVID-19 coronavirus disaster. Madam Secretary, would you do us the honor of calling roll?
I can't hear you, but I'm pretty sure you said if I was here, I'm here.
Are you sure, Mr. Contreras, you're here? I mean, oh, no. Ms. Guanajuato Webb? Nope. Ms. Haynes?
Here.
Mr. Overfelt?
Present.
Vanessa?
Here.
Mr. Smith? Nope, and myself. Yes, thank you, that's it, yeah. Sir, we have a quorum.
The records show that we do have a quorum of board members and that this meeting has been duly called in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. We'll have opening ceremonies with a moment of silence for personal reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We will go on to item 3, School Board Workshop, General Fund Budget Workshop. We'll have Amy Childress.
Mr. Mesa, Ms. Childers will be presenting. I will control the slideshow. Ms. Childers, are you ready?
Yes, good evening.
Hi.
Good evening, Mr. Mesa, Dr. Rios, members of the board. This evening, we will be presenting our second budget workshop for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. In this presentation, we will be reviewing our budget projections for our general fund revenue and expenditures. We will also take a look at our debt service budget, and then we will review the remaining dates on our budget calendar. Our general fund revenue is divided into 3 categories. The first category that we will look at this evening is our local revenue. Our local revenue is made up mostly of our tax collections. In 2018-19, our tax rate was $1.1598. In 2020, the legislative action took place and we had our House Bill 3 came into effect. And due to House Bill 3, they came in and compressed our tax rate. So our M&O tax rate for the 2019-20 tax year was 1.0617. For the 2020-2021 tax year, TEA will be using data from the district's July 25th, 2020 certified values, as well as the July 25th, 2019 certified values to calculate our Tier 1 compressed rate. For the calculations that we will be reviewing today, based on the information and the guidance that we have at this time, we will be using the calculated rate of 1.0481. Based on that M&O tax rate, we're showing our collections of projected tax collections to be $22,212,036. The remaining local revenue, our tuition and fees and all of that, we are keeping it the same. So we're showing an increase of about $1.1 million versus our 2019-20 budget. Our second category of revenue is our state funding. School districts receive this funding through local effort equalization, and for any given level of change in appraisal values, the district's funding, the state funding will adjust for the district. So as you can see, for the 2021 school year, we're looking at a reduction of about $1.1 million total. So with the tax collections, as you can see, it comes out to be about a wash between those categories. And then the third category of revenue that we receive is our federal funding. And it is made up of our indirect cost revenue, our school health related, our SHARs, our impact aid, and our miscellaneous federal revenues such as our OTC reimbursements and things like that. And we at this time we are projecting that those amounts remain the same as 19-20. For our general fund expenditures, the first category we're going to review is our salary, the TASB salary study. Our salaries, our personnel costs make up about 75% of our budget. Ms. Luz Cadena from TASB came down in last month and presented us their two recommendations. The first model that they recommended was a 2.0% increase, which would have been a total of $1.4 million increase. The second model that she discussed and presented was for a 1.5% increase, which would provide for a $1.1 million increase, a general pay increase. At this time, administration would like to give a recommendation of a third model. It is a 1.7% increase. It would provide teachers with the starting salary would remain the same, but it would provide teachers with a return to work stipend of $1,000. Paraprofessionals and auxiliary employees would receive a 1% increase of their midpoint, and administrative professionals would receive no salary increase for the 2021 year. This would be an increase of about $986,000 to our current salaries. Administration has also looked, and there are several positions that we will be converting or will be reducing salaries due to personnel changes throughout the year. Currently, at this time, we have indicated 20 positions, and it will be a net savings of about $915,000 at this time.
Mr. Mesa, before we go on to the next slide, I would just like to summarize all the positions that we are deleting. I want to make it clear that although we're deleting the positions, nobody in those positions is losing a job. We're transitioning all of the positions into classroom teaching positions. We have previously reported to the board about the reduction of all instructional specialists. We had that conversation. All of them will be being placed in classroom positions. There are 3 SGLC teachers that we will be transitioning to the classroom. Because of that way we're going to start the school year, there will not be a need for all teachers at SGLC, so they will all be transitioning to a classroom, with the exception of 1. We are considering also removing PE teachers from the classrooms and leaving 1 PE teacher per campus with 2 instructional aides. That's an overall summary of of the savings. There are other positions that are also being converted to teaching positions. However, these positions are federally funded. That's why they're not listed here. But these aren't the only ones. But these are the only ones paid with maintenance and operation budget.
Dr. Rios.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that personnel that is reassigned, that their contract days are kept, so they won't lose any money with jobs that require less contract days.
Absolutely, Mr. Mesa. And for 1 year, everybody keeps the pay they had the previous year. And we've that's a practice that we've kept. This year, we've notified people that transitioned last year that this coming year, they're going to the pay of the position they've had for a year. A year from now, we'll do the same. All of the teachers or all the people that had longer contract days or stipends, they will be keeping them. And in most cases, they will revert to the pay that is appropriate for that position. So yes, sir.
Okay, and then we'll discuss as a group the salary stipend for professional teachers.
Yes, sir. Whenever you're ready, we can stop, or when we get to the workbook, we can make that discussion whenever y'all are ready, sir.
The best thing to do is wait so we can have all our questions.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mesa.
Right?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think Mr. Overfelt wanted to ask you something, Mr. Mesa.
Yes, Mr. Overfelt?
Yes, sir. I was just curious, Miss Amy, if you could go back one slide on the positions. Dr. Rios, where it says an assistant principal at the 7th grade, there are we looking at, we don't need as many assistant principals this go round, or what was the reasoning behind removing or deleting that position?
So if you recall, Mr. Overfelt, last year, for most of the year, Mr. Jurado at the 7th grade and Ms. Correa as his assistant principal, and Ms. Cindy Salas and Mr. Soto at the 8th grade performed all the duties. And I know that it was a reduction in administration, but we believe that they did a more than adequate job and are able to handle the campus with 2 administrators. It's the same model that we have at the 6th grade, and the same number of students. So that is our recommendation. Now, the reason that we don't list the 8th grade assistant principal is because they were being funded as the dean of instruction, but for all intents and purposes, they were serving as the 8th grade assistant principal. So yes, sir, that's a correct observation. I'm sorry I didn't include that in my summary.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? We'll continue.
All right. We also have our health insurance fund. The annual contribution per employee has remained at $5,916.96 for the past 2 years. The insurance plan starts January 1st of every year. Some considerations the administration is looking into this year are to continue to offer an option of a no-cost insurance plan, to possibly increase the district contribution to an additional contribution of $25 per employee per pay period, and implement a wellness rate program to incentivize wellness participation. The next grouping of slides, what we did is we took what we call our workbooks that we send out to each department and campus, and we just kind of grouped them together into a like category. And just to kind of show you, we compared what they have submitted for 2020-21 versus what they received for 19-20. So for instance, this is curriculum and campus allocations. And as a total, you can see the green numbers, of course, are budgets that have decreased. The red is amounts that have increased. But as a net group, they are possibly increasing about $8,000. Campus support allocations are bilingual, college readiness, GT. As a net group, they are actually looking at a reduction of about $18,000. Our student programs, athletics, driver's ed, playoffs, UIL, that stayed static, so there was no increase or decrease. They remained the same. Our first category of departments, in this grouping, it's an increase of about $900,000. And I will point out under the debt service category, the increase to the 1.3 for 1920, we had a fund balance in our INS fund. So we utilized that fund balance to pay some of our debt payments. We used that fund balance up. So for 2021, we will be needing to move those payments up into the maintenance and operations category, which is why there's an increase in that area. Next slide. In this grouping of departments, they are actually having a decrease of $642. In our operations categories, our electricity, technology, transportation, water, and gas, they are showing a reduction of about $3,000. So in total expenditures for the general fund for projected 2020-21, we are looking at $103,718,530, which is an increase over 1920 of about $55,000. For our debt service, for 1920, we did not have an INS tax rate because in 1819 we did our TRE tax swap. So for 1920, we did not have an INS tax rate, but in November of 2019, the taxpayers did pass a bond election, and so we have a new $19 million bond. And at this time, we are projecting to have an INS rate of 0.057 cents. With that rate, that we are looking at collecting about $1.1 million in tax collections. Our bond payment for that bond is going to be $972,700 for the 2020-21 year. So that brings us to, as you can see, we are currently balanced at this time. We have total projected revenue for the 2020-21 year is $103,718,531. And we have total expenditures projected at this time of $103,718,531, which leaves us with a zero variance at this time. Just to review a couple dates on our budget calendar. So we have today's the second budget workshop, July 16th. We will have our third budget workshop. We will be discussing our facilities and operations projects. July 20th, we have a regular school board meeting. We do have a fourth budget workshop. We do not technically have a date scheduled. We will leave that optional if the board decides after the third budget workshop. If a fourth workshop is needed, we will schedule it at that time. We should receive our certified property values around between the 25th and 29th of July. And then we will have, I will be meeting with our county tax assessor on the 31st to review those. Then in August, on the 10th, we will be having our proposed budget and approval of employee compensation package at that time. August 17th is a regular scheduled board meeting. August 24th will be the public hearing where we will adopt the budget and the tax rate. And then on August 27th will be final amendments for the 2019-20 fiscal year. At this time, we also have, Dr. Rios will be presenting, we have the interactive workbook that we will also be preparing and providing for the board for this year.
Mr. Mesa, when we go to the interactive workbook, in essence, it'll summarize a lot of what Ms. Childress provided. We'll go over the positions again, we'll go over the salary increase, and we'll talk about what we will discuss at the operations workshop. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to discuss those decisions at that point. But before we go to that point, Mr. Mesa, do you or any of the board members have any questions on something that we presented here that may not be presented in the budget workbook?
I have some questions, and I can't see everyone, so if you have a question, would you please? Okay, I can see everyone. I'm glad that we're having going to have the interactive worksheet, because I know that we had discussed the options when we did the salary study in regard to the 2% stipend. But my understanding was when we had initial conversations, we wanted to do the 2% increase as a stipend, and it was not including administration. That was one. The other part, I don't know how, I'm trying to envision field trips, for example, leaving the amount for field trips if, we are going to be using buses to take students anywhere. Are we using that amount, $14,000, for virtual field trips?
So two things, Mr. Mesa. You're correct on the salary study, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, about the options, and we'll get into that when we look at the workbook. It'll be clear, and then y'all can give us more clear direction on what other options you want to see. As far as the salaries, as far as the budgets for the departments, there's a whole lot of things that we don't know yet. So for example, we've allocated the same amount of money to athletics. It's very nebulous as to what's going to happen with all of those athletic trips, because UIL hasn't made a decision yet. We're preparing as if we were last year, but chances are that's going to change. And we're going to take a whole lot of guidance from the state in terms of transportation. They didn't give that today when we visited with the commissioner, but he promised that he would be giving that very soon. So when the commissioner tells us about how to transport students, we'll apply the same logic to how we transport students for field trips or don't transport them at all. And at that point, the budget workbook will begin to get updates in terms of reductions, because there won't be field trips, and how much will it cost to have virtual field trips. So those are just great questions, but we haven't gotten the determination from the state. When we do, budgets will probably be reduced to some extent. Okay.
Any other questions from board members? Hearing none. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yeah, just an update on the escrow account on the project. Are we seeing any dividends? Have we seen any reduction there with the light, or where are we with that project? Is it going to make a difference in the next budget, this budget?
Yeah, yes, sir. Ms. Childress showed a slight reduction in the utilities. We still have to get that determination from our consultants that did the whole performance contract. However, I will tell you that the guarantee is for 12 months after they close out the project. The project was closed out in May. However, we can arrive at some determination of what we're going to save. We just haven't done that yet. When we get to the operations workshop, we will hopefully have a better indication of other savings. We're just not there yet, but we will by the time we get to the operations budget.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll go on.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly review the budget workbook, Mr. Mesa, and that'll be a great time to have a discussion on salaries, okay? So what you're seeing in front of you is the budget workbook. At the end, it's the certified tab. Are you all able to see the tabs as I'm flipping between one or the other?
Yes.
Okay. So the certified tab is where everything relates to. So for example, the revenue obviously will shift as the TA updates the funding tables and how we know what the tax rate will actually be compressed to. But right now it's a good indication. The general pay increase is this first tab that you see at the top. That is, at this point, that's probably the first option that the board has, and at this point, really the only option. So if we look at the general pay increase, the board will have the choice here to select what they will be choosing. Now we have obviously chosen Model C, the one we're recommending, but as the board turns in their budget, their suggestions, they might pick a different option. There's obviously the Model A from TASB, which is 2%, and the Model B, which is 1.7. But these are actual pay increases that have to be replicated the following year. The administration's recommendation is we've met both about in between, and we've given a 1.7. Now, Mr. Mesa, if the board chooses, we can do options D and E, which would replicate the TASB models as a stipend. However, because we are tasked with reducing the budget considerably for the 21-22 school year, we're strongly recommending that we choose a stipend that the board isn't held to for the future, because if severe reductions happen, as we've been told they are going to happen, we may not afford it in the following year. However, we can increase the amount of stipends in option D and E. Is that what you would like us to do, Mr. Mesa?
I think all of us will have a chance. I think my main concern is that when we briefly discuss the item, we mention teachers and not administrative personnel.
And that's correct. If you see here on the schedule, administrative professionals, it shows a 0. So our recommendation is teachers get a salary increase, paraprofessionals, and auxiliary. But administrative personnel, which is essentially everybody from the pay grade of assistant principal all the way through the superintendent, would get no increase. So you're right. That's what we discussed, and that is in fact what we're recommending. But the question is, do you want us to replicate Model A and B as a stipend to give the board more choices?
That's my prerogative. Most districts are going into a stipend because of the uncertainty for the coming years.
Okay. So we'll add maybe Childers. We'll add options D and E at a 2% and 1.5%. We did the one in the middle, but we'll have those options for the board to choose and place in the workbook. Okay. The next tab. I'm sorry, Mr. President. Is there any more questions on salary from any of the board members?
Anyone else?
Mr. Mesa?
Ms. Roosevelt?
Yes, sir. Just again, a reiteration as we look at Model C and what might be Model D and E. It just to reiterate, it is a stipend for those who are watching at home right now. It's it would be a one-time thing. It would not carry over the next year unless we decide to do it. It's not considered a true pay increase. It's a one-time stipend, and I just want that to be very clear to those out there who are watching right now.
Yes, Mr. Overfeld, that's correct. And we also have to be clear that the stipend, even though you get it paid throughout the year, it does not count towards your salary for retirement. So even though every teacher in this model would see a $1,000 pay increase, the retirement or contributions to retirement is in fact the same as it was in the 2019-2020 school year.
Dr. Rios,
Yes, sir.
I just want to keep the board members abreast of, initially when we started the budget, I kept asking about the pipelines and possible revenue that we might have new monies. And so just want to make sure that when we discuss budget and revenues, that we keep that in mind. There were some pipelines that came through Valverde County that we're still waiting to see what monies we're going to receive from those pipelines.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? I can't see everyone, so I guess we don't have any questions.
The next tab is a conversion reductions. Those we've listed here. The board can provide guidance to the administration so we can consider everybody. But at this time, we've auto-filled all of them as yes, that we are making those reductions. If there's any questions about any specific position at this point, I know Mr. Overfeld already asked the ones about the assistant principals at the middle school. If there are any other questions about any position, we could definitely answer those.
Dr. Reeves, I wish we had other information in regard to what their salary is for this year and how it would change for the coming year.
Yeah, Mr. Miller, we can provide that in an update. The salary will mainly affect the instructional support specialist, and because the other positions, they're pretty much teaching positions. But we'll definitely provide a chart that shows the board the savings moving forward.
I think that would help quite a bit.
Okay. But at this time, the salary that is shown here on the far column does indicate the overall salary. So for example, 3 teachers at the SGLC, when we consider the starting salary of a teacher, that's how much we would be saving for the long haul. Now, the difference in pay between what, like, for example, any one of the instructional specialists listed here, that's what we're saving in a new position. Now, obviously, after their salary is further reduced from what they're making now, if they stay in a position, there will be additional savings, but that's not until the following school year, the 21-22 school year. And it'll be small in comparison to what we've already listed here, but we'll definitely include that, Mr. Smith. The other teachers, whether they're P teachers or teachers at the SGLC, the savings will remain the same. Okay. Another important, I'm sorry, before I go on to the next tab, are there any questions from any of these positions?
Are we going to have any, yes, Dr. Rios, any cost savings by attrition? Any retirements that we can add to this?
At this point, those retirements have already been considered because we're actually going to put a person in that position. Obviously, a younger person will probably earn less money, but it's already been considered for this year. By attrition, what might be a savings is if we don't fill positions because of reduction in enrollment due to the COVID situation. But at that point, we're probably giving up more in ADA than we're saving in teachers, if that was to happen.
That's it. I don't see anybody else with a question.
Mr. Mesa, on the construction budget, we have limited the next tabs to no indications. One of the reasons that we are presenting a balanced budget tonight is because we haven't considered what construction projects or regular upkeep we should have. And we'll have that discussion when we have the operations budget. We always reduce the construction budget by the deficit of the budget. So for example, today we may have been $1 million short in what we would have otherwise presented, but we always take that money from the construction budget and just say, okay, so these aren't projects that we will have. However, when we have a construction budget, the board might ask us to consider other savings to be able to fund some of those projects. We're just not there yet. Same thing with food service, that still shows a 0. Anything else in operations would still show a 0, other than obviously the debt payment that we have there. Same thing for technology. As we have the operations budget and we have updates from the state, all of that will start to fill in very quickly. Are there any questions, Mr. Mesa?
Dr. Risa, I have one. The money that the district received from the CARE Act goes into the general fund?
Yes, Mr. Mesa, it is going to go into the general fund, but we've got enough guidance from the state to say that the state aid is going to be reduced by that much money. So it really isn't any kind of increase to our operating budget. It's a wash. It's you swap one for the other. There's some discussion that maybe the federal government didn't intend the money to be used that way, but in other times when the federal government has aided the state, that's exactly what the money has been used for. About 10 years ago, the same thing happened. The state gave a whole lot of, or the federal government gave a whole lot of aid, and the states used it to replace what the local budgets were reduced by. So there's a precedent for it, and so it's obviously legal in what they're doing, but it is going to be part of our general budget, and there isn't a significant increase. If anything, it would go to pay for expenses that we've already incurred.
Anyone else? We're good.
Mr. Mesa, if there are no questions, we will change the budget workbook to reflect different options for the salaries. And then we'll look forward to having the next workshop on operations, and hopefully we'll have some updates on the income that we'll get, the revenue, and be able to make other decisions at that point.
So we're going to adjourn this workshop unless there's some questions. Again, we're going to receive the interactive workbook. If there's no questions, we're going to adjourn the workshop and go into our regular meeting. Any questions? We'll go into item 9, reports. First report we have is overview of board required training and Summer Leadership Institute information. Sandra Hernandez.
I'll be calling up that presentation. You'll just give me 1 second. I'll bring that up for you here real quick.
Here we go. Good evening, Mr. Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. This evening, I'll be providing you with just a brief overview of the board training requirements. Board policy BBD local calls for the board president to annually report and announce the status of each board member's continuing education credits at the last regular board meeting before the district's regular uniform election date, whether or not an election is held. In this case, for our school district, because we have elections in May, this report would have typically been done in April. Due to COVID-19, as you remember, we pushed the election date to November the 3rd. So the completion of most training requirements has been waived until September the 1st. And at that time, in September, during the regular called meeting, the board president will report the status of the board member CEUs at that time. This next slide gives you an overview of what the training requirements are. If you see on the left-hand side on the column, these levels are required. We are required to have 3 hours of team building. This is your team of 8 training. This is required for all trustees and the superintendent, and it's required annually. The next row is the ISO, which is evaluating and improving student outcomes. This was previously called Senate Bill 5066. We received that 2 years ago, that training, or last year. That's a 3-hour training that's required, and it's required every 2 years. The next one is child abuse prevention. 1 hour is required every 2 years for all trustees. Cybersecurity training is required, 1 hour training annually. And a post-legislative update is required at anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, and that's required only after each legislative session. Also, what's required is an additional 5 hours of continuing education credits annually, in addition to whatever is required annually. And based on the board's experience, because you're not new board members, you're seasoned board members, each trustee would fulfill somewhere between 9 and 16 hours, depending on your own individual selection of courses and trainings. So how do you complete those training requirements? There are 2 ways that you can complete them. Right now, we're in the middle of the opportunity for Summer Leadership Institute. All of their trainings are online. There's no face-to-face trainings at this time that's provided by TASB. They're all online. You have an option of taking the training through the SLI, which is happening right now, the 24th through the 26th, or you can go through the TASB Online Learning Center. Both sites will require your MyTASB login. So how long do you have to complete your training requirements? Well, remember that the completion of the most training requirements for this year has been extended due to COVID-19. So you have until September the 1st. Well, if you look at the SLI trainings that are available right now, they are recorded, and they will be available for you to go in and view them up to 30 days. You have a 30-day a window of time. And you can access them through the email that was sent to you by Accelerant, and there's a link that you can get on that you can register for those individual training sessions. The sessions that you would see that are on the TASB Online Center, they're also available on demand. Some of them are available at no charge, and then some of them will have a fee. However, I do want to want you to watch out for the credits, because when you look at some of the sessions that are on the TASB Online Learning Center, you want to carefully look to see how many credits. Some of them don't have credits, and some of them have very few credits. So you want to be able to take a look at that. So now at the time is a great opportunity for you to take your courses, get your CEUs through the SLI sessions. But I do want to remind you that if you're not available or not seeing them between here and tomorrow, they will be available only for 30 days, only for the next 30 days. And that's it. That's all the pretty much very briefly the information on the board training requirements, and I can answer any questions that anyone may have.
Sandra, I have one. The cybersecurity, that's the one that had to be completed by June 1st.
That is correct, and I believe this one was sent to you by email. We did send a link for you to complete. Again, those will be recorded and those will be reported so that you will have the credit for that as well.
And can you reach out? I know that we met here yesterday for the child abuse one. Can you reach out to the other board members to make sure that they have the link?
Absolutely, sir. We can certainly reach out and send the link so that everyone has it. We want to make sure that everyone is pretty much fulfills those required trainings. You saw that there are two very important ones. The cybersecurity, as you mentioned, the child abuse prevention one is the other requirement at that time. Now, I will say that your team building, your team of 8, that's been completed in terms of the requirements for this year. So what you're going to get reported for this year, you've already completed. In September, we'll begin a new cycle. So you'll start a new year. And so my recommendation is that we wait until the election so that then we'll have that team of 8, and then you can do your team of 8 training after that.
Person to wait and see what kind of format.
Yes, and we will see how this will be. We will look out and work with TASB to see how this will work. This may be available virtually. I can see that, but there's always the option through the Region Service Center, who have been our trainers as well in the past, can also offer a small session if we reach out to them.
I believe Ms. Gonzalez had a question.
I'm just confused about the cybersecurity. Didn't we do that already?
This, ma'am, this one was released, I would say maybe about a month or 2 ago. And so, yes, you would have already completed that. We can certainly check and verify, and we will let you know.
There was 100% completion for the cybersecurity. All board members have met that requirement.
Well, cybersecurity. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, has anyone listened to the general sessions? Anyone?
I haven't done the general sessions, but I've dropped in and done several of the breakout sessions today. I went in and did several of those, but I didn't get the general one. I'll go watch one though.
I think there's some great speakers, and they're highlighted on that Lone Star magazine. Thanks. Any other questions from board members? Thank you, Sandra.
You are welcome, sir. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Next item we have on our agenda is administration. 11A, discussion regarding summer 2020 programs and the reopening of schools for the 2021 school year. Dr. Rios.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa. I'm going to share the screen for a presentation. Mr. Mesa, since March of last year, we've had to do some things differently, I would say very differently, in terms of closing all types of operations. But looking to August, the commissioner has made it clear over the past few weeks that we are expected to resume full operations, obviously giving some options. So we made the decision to start resuming operations with some of the activities. So I want to first review those. Then I want to share what the commissioner's guidance has been as of late, including today, and then present our options for reopening the 2021 school year. But first, I want to just review what we've already done. And I know that there's been some concern from board members. So I'd like a chance just to respond to any questions or concerns that they may have. But again, our goal in having these type of sessions over the summer is to begin to open up schools so we can be ready to go by August. We started with our athletic sports performance camps. These are optional for students. We're having a limited amount of athletes that can attend at any one time. So therefore, we have 5 sessions throughout the day. And even the 5 sessions are divided into 4 groups, where right now there's no more than 20 students to a group. And in visiting with Coach Smith yesterday, no one group reached the total number of 20 students, and there was at least 2 adults supervising the group. There's COVID pre-screenings going on that includes a form that the parents have to submit. There's temperature checks. There's facial coverings from the staff and the students in transition. This is pretty much the model that we're going to use when we start the school year. Now, obviously, there are students that are going to be infected with the COVID-19, and when that happens, students are asked to isolate 14 days to see if they have any symptoms, or they can go get tested, and if they bring the testing to Doc Dixon, that's negative. We also started our pre-K summer school in a face-to-face setting. Again, the program is optional for 3 and 4-year-old students. It's all in-school instruction provided, and we do the pre-screening and temperature checks the same. Then we started the TSI summer bridge camps for Delaware high school students, CTE students, and early college high school students. Again, it's the same pre-screenings, facial coverings are required. This program is intended mainly for college level dual credit courses as a requirement. But again, our goal is to start opening the schools, making opportunities available for the students that are being made available throughout the state, and again, allowing us to get used to the idea of how we're going to have to screen students. There have been students in these programs that have tested positive, but because of the social distancing that we require and the face mask and the different groups throughout the day, when somebody notifies us that they're positive, we don't have to shut the whole camp down. We just shut down the group that they belong to. But that's only possible when our adults monitoring the groups hold fast to the structures that we've put in place. Are there any questions on or concerns on what we're doing so far before we talk about what we're going to do this coming year, Mr. Mesa?
Any questions? I hear an answer.
Okay, so I'll continue with discussions of what we're going to do this coming year. The commissioner, he pointed out something that was obviously not a surprise, but still no less alarming. And he's talking about how real the COVID slide is. The state offers some programs for students to engage in, and they're able to measure how students are performing. In this slide, they're showing students from 3 different zip codes where students are mainly high income, another zip code where they're middle income, and then the lower income group. And you can see where in the high income group, they actually marked a 4.8% increase from what they had learned in January. The middle income group showed a 34.2% decrease in what they had learned, but the low income group registered a 55.6% decrease. The message from the commissioner is clear that moving forward to this coming year, we can have remote instruction, but it has to be a remote instruction that amounts for significant instruction, not just homework packets. With that in mind, he also mentioned that the funding is going to depend entirely on how we instruct students. Our finance system, as that Ms. Childress presented earlier, revolves entirely around school attendance. So how do we count children for school attendance so that we can get funding? Well, there has to be a minimum of 75,600 minutes over the year period, and students have to receive a minimum of 4 hours of daily instruction to generate funding. What the commissioner told us was that if students get 4 hours of daily instruction, even if it's a home-based instruction, we can still count the total minutes for that school day towards the 75,000. So that's the options that he gave us. So here are the models that we came up with, and we divided them in four groups: pre-K through second grade, third grade through fifth grade, grades middle school, which are 6 through 8, and then the high school. And these are the options that we want to present our parents. After we finalize these options, and again, we shared them with the cabinet. We've been discussing them with cabinet for a while now. We're sharing them with the board tonight. Tomorrow we'll share with the principals. And we're hopeful that by early next week at the latest, we'll be able to ask the principals to start calling the parents, 100% of the parents, to see which of the 3 choices they select. The first choice for schooling kids pre-K through second grade is in person. This is a traditional at-school instruction where daily attendance is taken. The ratios are 22-1, and students attend physically on a daily basis. The second option for pre-K through second grade students is fully online. However, to have students engage fully online in pre-K through second grade, there's some requirements. First, the student has to be engaged daily. You have to have parent supervision during the school day. You cannot have students choose one day to engage and not the next day. It has to be 100% of the time. The students have to have a dedicated laptop or computer for a minimum of 4 hours. In other words, if there's 3 students that want to engage at home and they only have 1 laptop, that's impossible. They have to have a high-speed internet, and the parent and the student must complete a Google training provided by the classroom teacher so that they know how to navigate the platform where we're providing the assignments. In this fully online program, students in pre-K through second grade only, they would view pre-recorded lessons, and they would have assignments that must be turned in on a daily basis. We can't allow students to turn in all assignments at the end of the week or at the end of the 6 weeks and then get credit for being fully online, and then the school get credit for attendance. It doesn't work that way. And again, the students must be engaged no less than 4 hours a day. In the hybrid model, it's just a combination of being instructed at school and at home. You still have to have daily attendance, whether you're at school or at home, and you still have all the other requirements of parent supervision, a dedicated laptop, high-speed internet. The difference here is that students attend every other day to the classroom, and on the days when they're not in the classroom, then they're viewing the pre-recorded lessons and submitting those assignments and are engaged for at least 4 hours. Now, the nice thing about this program is that rather than being in a classroom of 22 students that come every day, you're only in a classroom of 10 to 11 students. The other 10 to 11 students are learning from home. Again, the bigger difference that you're going to see between pre-K and second grade and the rest of the elementary is the pre-recorded lessons and the requirement to submit daily assignments every day. That is a requirement that is exclusive for pre-K through second grade. When we look at the next group that is 3rd through 5th grade, everything else is still the same. The big difference is that students are logging in daily for face-to-face instruction. The instruction is, again, for 4 hours. In our case, we want to provide academic support, anything else that they need outside of the regular classroom after the 4 hours. So some students who are receiving additional work, with additional support, whether it be through some form of 504 accommodation or some kind of special education services, that will probably be done outside of the 4 hours where they're engaged in other work. The hybrid model, again, is the same, with the exception that that service is probably during the day if they need other academic support. Again, the biggest difference between the early elementary grades and the second elementary grades, 3rd through 5th, is 3rd through 5th graders are actually engaged with the teacher the entire time. Now, for middle school, 6th through 8th grade, again, right now we're holding the requirements to be the same. Still need parent supervision during the day. We don't think that you can leave a 6th grader alone during the day and expect them to engage, so there has to be some supervision at home. The class sizes for in school, they're a little bit bigger than elementary. Room provided, there's at least 25 students. The commissioner said today that he does not expect for the 45 square foot per student to remain. He thinks that's going to be waived. They're going to use a Canvas platform versus a Google platform. Ms. Gomez will be asking for your approval later today to be able to purchase those platforms. The students have to be engaged in the classroom activities throughout the entire instructional day. Because at the secondary, we have different periods where they switch from history to English to science, we can't allow you to just be engaged 4 hours a day. You have to be engaged the entire instructional day. Same thing with the hybrid model. Okay. Now for 9th through 12th grade, it's pretty much the same as middle school, except for high school. We're not requiring that there be parent supervision on a daily basis, and we're not requiring the parent. This is a mistake here, I apologize. It's only the student that must complete a Canvas training provided by the classroom teacher or provided through a module that they will complete online. But the rest of the activities and descriptions of the classes are the same. Again, our principals are preparing a questionnaire where they're going to call every individual parent at their school and ask how they want their child to be instructed. We want to make sure that parents have choices and that we support them. Our main goal is to have students engaged in learning every day, whether it be a face-to-face instruction, the classroom, or instruction supported through technology. We recognize that not everybody is going to have a laptop. We will have some laptops to check out to students. I informed the board in an update that we had ordered, or we're in the process of ordering an additional 1,000 laptops. So we have plans to support students who don't have laptops. We obviously just hope that a whole lot of them have laptops because we don't have 10,500 laptops. Our goal is to have 2,000 laptops to be able to support some students, but we're definitely looking to buy more. Okay. Before I go on to the next slide, Mr. Mesa, are there any questions, I'm sure there are, about our model to support learners this coming school year?
I'll start and then I'll turn it over to board members. I just, on the training required for both the student and the parent, is that going to be a limited amount of parents and students? And what is it going to look like?
Mr. Mesa, the training, we're still in the process of establishing that. Obviously, we would look towards our partners and Mr. Hengay to create the training, the modules that they would do online and get credit for, and then they'd be ready to go. But for the parent training, That one's going to be a little bit more specialized. It could very well be where teachers ask parents to come into the library, to the cafeteria, create social distancing, where they sit down with a student and we very quickly take them through a 45-minute training and then follow up with Zoom meetings afterwards for more questions that they may have. We'll start those as soon as we finalize how many parents are going to choose the fully online or the hybrid model. The commissioner has given us some latitude on attendance for the first 6 weeks of school, understanding that we may not be entirely ready. So we may not check students as present the first couple of days if they haven't gotten the training yet, but we can very quickly catch up with anybody in the first week or two of school. Again, our goal is to get everybody done before the first day of school, but we don't know at this point how many parents are going to select the fully online or the hybrid model.
Okay, I have a ton of questions, but I don't want to take all the time. I'll just ask one more and then leave it to the board members. Students are going to be limited in the number of electives, and I started thinking about some of the requirements for the different diplomas, and there's like foreign language, for example, and of course there's advanced CTE and so forth. So if they're limited to the number of electives, how are they going to complete the requirements for graduation?
Mr. Mesa, in the next slide, I'm going to discuss the limited electives, but that's mainly for middle school. There will be no limitation at the high school.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'll turn it over to board members. I can't see all of them, so Mr. Contreras?
Yeah, on the first slide, pre-K to second grade, it says that they're going to be pre-recorded messaging and they have to be attended for a minimum of 4 hours. How are they going to be tracked that they actually logged on? Is the system going to be able to do kind of like a timestamp when they log on and for the period they were logged on for?
Yes, sir. There's a couple ways of verifying. One of them is obviously the student being logged on into the different modules that we would have for them. But there's also a requirement to submit daily assignments. The state has called it to indicate progress. So that's why a student has to turn in daily assignments so we can have that as evidence and be able to collect the ADA. Obviously, we also have to have a deeper discussion with the parents that if the student is not meeting the requirements, then they're essentially thwarting the attendance laws. So we can't let that go too far. But there'll be ways of monitoring them, yes, sir.
And then the last question is, so since they have to attend a minimum of 4 hours, let's say how's that going to work if let's say they go to get tested for COVID and they can't log on with it? Within the period of waiting for the results, would they be counted absent? How I'm just wondering and thinking outside the box, because you figure that at some point, kids or family members are going to be tested and stuff, and there's going to be a period of, well, you got tested, you're not going to be able to attend probably on online or something. How's that going to work? I mean,
well, if someone got tested, they can attend online because they're at home. So even any student who is on the in-person model, if something was to happen and they were to get tested and go home, they can switch from in-person to online just as soon as we can get them connected to a laptop. But if they are in the fully online, then regardless of testing requirements or even their health, as long as they're able to log on, they can. Now, if a student is so sick that they can't log on, well, then it's a regular absence, just as if they were not coming to school on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mr. Contreras. Anyone else? Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes, I'm wondering about the pre-K or the Head Start. They have to be tested, I mean, they are tested at the beginning and at the middle of the school year. How are they gonna do that, the testing? For,
Yes, ma'am. We have to work with Dr. Talamantes. We've already checked, and Head Start is okay with whatever models we choose to implement. Now, working around the specifics, I'm going to have to get reports from every department in terms of what their needs are for different testing. So, for example, right now we're enrolling bilingual students, and they too have to be tested with all the programs between now and the start of the school year to define how everything is going to be done. There's still a whole lot of work for principals to fill in the details of what's going to happen at their specific campus.
okay, and as far as also, their motor skills and like the manipulatives and everything, are they gonna have to have their own?
Yes, ma'am. We'll have to again see how the campus checks for that. At some point, I would imagine that they can have some type of video conferencing with the child where they can do some of this assessment. It doesn't preclude us. The fact that they have to do pre-recorded sessions doesn't preclude us from still being able to check using different modes, whether it be for 15 minutes a day or however much time it would take.
And also the safety of the kids. We talked about temperature checks, is that correct? Like say, for example, I want to send my kid to school every day. What safety do we have? I mean, I think temperature checks, you mentioned that.
Yeah, Ms. Gonzalez, if you'll allow me, about 3 more slides down the road, we're going to talk about those again.
Okay, but they'll be conveyed to the parents, I'm sure. Because that's what they're expecting, and I know. And about the bus and all that, so you're bringing that up later?
Yes, ma'am. Now on the buses and even on the safety checks that we're going to have, the commissioner today announced that they will be releasing that guidance very soon. They have obviously drafts in place, but we're hopeful that by next week, no later than the week after that, they'll have the guidance checks. We don't think it's going to be too different than what we're already anticipating. We got a little sneak preview at some of them, but again, when they release that guidance, then we'll finalize it in terms of everything that we're going to be doing. We have an idea, just like we had an idea about the in-person, the fully online, the hybrid. We have an idea of what the health requirements are going to be. And we also believe that the commissioner will give us latitude to go above and beyond what they're requiring. So we're prepared to have some of the discussion today, but it won't be final until the commissioner releases their guidance.
Okay, and they were also concerned about the small classrooms, but you said he already waived it today, that square footage or whatever.
Yes, he's going to waive that. He indicated that today. Again, it's not official until it is released. But still, our goal is to provide as much social distancing as possible. That's why it's important that the principals be provided the final version of the options so that they can start making individual phone calls to 100% of our student enrollment to receive the options that the parents choose, and they can prepare for the beginning of the school.
Also, they mentioned something about eating in the classroom. Some classes eat in the classroom, some in the cafeteria, and they'll be alternating. Is that still being considered?
Yes, ma'am, that is being considered, yet still not finalized. Tomorrow, the food service department will meet with the principals to discuss some of those options. And again, that's just in anticipation of what the commissioner is going to release. But I'll be discussing that just briefly here in the next couple of slides.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Orfeld?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Dr. Rios, and Mr. Contreras kind of hit on this already, but I just wanted to get some clarification. For students that say are going, let's say we do the every other day thing, and it's 10 students in a classroom, and one of those students ends up testing positive for COVID-19. Are we going to mandate that the other 9 students and the teacher go into quarantine per CDC? guidelines, and therefore they'd have to go online, and then we'd have to have a either a sub for the other 10 who are coming in the next day, and that teacher would they be working from home, or would they be technically on sick leave? Because it's going to happen. We're going to have a student test or a teacher test positive after they've been in contact with students and all that. So I was wondering what our plan is for that.
Again, Mr. Overford, these are the questions that we've been asking the commissioner through our, and this is the guidance that he will be providing in the next couple of days. Our goal is to have every teacher wear a mask, provide social distancing so that nobody infects another student, so as long as we follow those rules. But the prudent thing to do is, once somebody tests positive, is to make sure that everybody self-quarantines. However, I can't finalize that recommendation to the board tonight because we're waiting for the commissioner's guidance to see what else we haven't thought about. But right now it does look that way, that we would have them self-quarantine. Now, whether someone's going to work from home and provide the lessons online, or whether they're just going to be home and be on paid leave, we haven't made those determinations yet, but that's all in the items still left to be answered.
Okay, because I know with everything that's happening in the state right now, the governor actually backing down on the phased opening there. I wouldn't be surprised if TEA starts to change its tune as well. And I guess you can see where I'm going with this. You know, we could have that happen, and then several weeks later, if it happens again, it could happen 4 or 5 times during the year, worst case scenario, and it'd get really complicated. So I'll be interested to see what TEA has to say on all of that. Thank you.
Incidentally, Mr. Overfeld, the commissioner did point out today about having waivers for oversized classrooms, especially on the fully online and on the hybrid model, whereas if one teacher couldn't teach for a number of days, and because every classroom next year will be self-contained, particularly at the elementary, we could increase the number of students per classroom while that teacher is not available as an option. So we've thought about so many different scenarios, but again, we're going to wait for the commissioner before we finalize that recommendation. But there's still a lot to be decided. The biggest one, however, is how we're going to school the students, and we're glad to be able to finalize some options.
Thank you.
Thank the board members for those questions. We'll continue with the slide.
Just for anybody watching at home, there's obviously this is still in the product, so we're going to make some corrections for some grammatical errors, and we will put this out to principals tomorrow, and then hopefully to the rest of our staff late tomorrow evening, and then to the community formally, and hopefully our principals will start making those calls as soon as they return from this week off that we have every year. Because of how much work there is to do, we will be making an exception. We usually don't let anybody work the 4th of July week. We're closed, but we will be making the exception for any campus that wants to begin making those phone calls, just for those people that are going to be calling, mainly because they're going to be paid with extra duty pay. The principals will have to bring in some staff to make the phone calls. So we'll make that allowance so they can start calling earlier than they otherwise, if they choose to. But officially, everyone should get a call the day we return from 4th of July weekend, which I guess is the Monday the 6th of July. Okay. Some considerations for secondary setting. At the secondary, which again, 6th through 12th grade, we are considering differentiated start times. That means that we would have half the students per campus start at a regular time, and then the other group of students start 2 or even 3 hours later. What that would allow us to do is not have a whole lot of interaction in the hallways because passing times would be different. Students that start in the first shift would obviously be alone at the campus for most of the morning, and then students who start the second shift would start at a period in between. Now that's both teachers and students. So for example, let's just take Del Rio Middle School, for example. We could have a scenario where 7th grade was to start at a certain time, and then 8th grade would start later on in the day. High school, 9th through 12th grade, it would be half across all grade levels. So that would limit the number of students in the hallway during transition, and it would also allow us to transport more kids with the social distancing in the buses. We would ask students to wear masks in transition time. Now, that's what we're working on right now, Mr. Mesa, members of the board. It's just inconceivable to think that we would have as many students, and those of us that have visited our secondary campuses, when kids are going to lunch or when times when they have to pass, it's just a whole lot of students in the hallway. And it's just, again, difficult to imagine that many students in the hallway and then being able to track who they got sick from. It just doesn't make immediate sense. So I know it's a big difference, but it's something that we definitely have to consider. We'll be finalizing that here very soon and putting that out formally. At this point, I can't say with 100% degree of certainty that that's what we're going to do, but it is very likely that we do that recommendation, Mr. Mesa. For middle school, they've developed a plan where teachers switch classes instead of the students for the most part. There has to be some switching, but students would be in the classroom, then the teachers in that team or that pod would rotate, again, limiting the number of students in the hallway. Those of you that have visited Del Rio Middle School know that for the number of students, those hallways are very narrow. So we have to have that consideration as well. Now, having said that, that would, for middle school, it would limit the electives. So students who really want to be in band, for example, would belong to a certain team. But again, if you're in that team that supports band, they will not be able to support all the other electives. Those are just choices that obviously the principal and the students will have to make. But again, these are different times and we have to have different plans. So we can guarantee your first elective, your primary elective, but maybe not your secondary. Again, this is just at the middle school. Are there any questions about that, Mr. Mesa, members of the board?
Dr. Rios, well, I think there'll be so many questions. I think we'll just let you go on to the other slides and then bring our questions at the end.
Okay. This is a slide that Ms. Gonzalez was referring to. Again, we'll have the pre-screens and the release from liability form from the parents where they agree to check their kids for symptoms on a daily basis. The temperature checks will be conducted at the campuses. Facial coverings will be required for teachers and all staff members. At this point, the students will be encouraged to wear face coverings during passing times. We don't know that we can mandate it yet. Obviously, the process says, yes, it's required, then we will absolutely require those. Social distancing measures will be required inside the school in the classroom setting as much as possible. We're having a whole lot of hand sanitizers available, restrooms being cleaned on a daily basis. Just a real aggressive disinfecting plan where restrooms are cleaned numerous times of the day. The desks, anytime there's a switch in students at the desks, those are also cleaned. We're talking about not having public water fountains and allowing students to bring water. And any other measures that are recommended by the CDC and the Texas Department of State Health Services through obviously the TA before we open up. Mr. Mesa, that concludes the presentation. Are there any questions?
I'll start with some, and then I'm sure we have others that will come. Sometimes, those minor details which can be major once we have different scenarios. My question has to do with food preparation, for example. If we have two different shifts, what is the schedule going to look like for auxiliary employees, cafeteria, and others?
They will obviously have to show some shifting. Now, because of the way the meals are prepared, a lot of it will have to do with people that are just left behind to serve. We expect that the shifts will vary. Some people will be asked to come in later, but the number of personnel will not necessarily vary. But definitely have shifts come in 2 hours apart or even 3 hours apart, because obviously the later shift will come in mainly to serve and clean. But we'll work out those details with food service here in the next couple of days. But in our estimation and how we've temporarily studied it, it won't require additional personnel, just shifting the times that people come in.
And as far as the options that are being offered to parents, you mentioned that you'll be meeting with the principals and releasing this information, but is it possible to post this information or have it? Not everyone reads the newspaper, but if you could have it, once you have it all set, to make sure that parents have a way of knowing what they're going to be choosing.
Yes, Mr. Mesa, we're going to do some revisions tonight just because there are some words that weren't changed, the editing. We'll visit with the principals tomorrow. As soon as we finalize it, which isn't going to be too different what we shared with y'all today, we're going to do a couple things. One, we'll probably make a video and post a video just explaining the options, and then we'll post the presentation of the items on our webpage so that parents can continuously go back and view it and then ask questions of the principal or their administrations at the campus where they're at.
I'll turn it over to board members for questions. Amy?
Sorry, you're muted, ma'am.
Yeah, I had to mess with it. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mesa. I have a couple of concerns. I guess it's overwhelming, and I'm sure it's overwhelming for our parents in our community that's listening to us right now. There's a lot of stuff that has to go on to prepare and to be safe. And I know the commissioner has stated that he wants us to start school, but Dr. Rios, I feel that we should be prepared as a district to start as, maybe have to start as a home base because the cases are rising. And I worry about just our staff and our children. And then we have staff that have some health issues as well. I know that maybe have you addressed those with with the staff that have health issues. And then we talked about some of the options for pre-K through second, and I didn't hear anything about special ed as well. And I know it's a lot, and I know you all have a lot to get together and come together with. But my concern is that I feel that maybe we should look at being at home base, starting home base, because I don't see this slowing down, and we should just be prepared ourselves and prepare our parents for that. And like I said, I'm overwhelmed, and I'm always nervous and anxious about these, what's going on. But I just want us to be really prepared, and and so many changes in the class sizes and stuff like that. It's worrisome to me. It really is. So those are just my concerns, and I just wanted to get that out to you so you can address them as as you see fit. So thank you, Mr. Mesa.
If I may, Mr. Mesa.
Sure.
Ms. Haynes, and I guess my response is also a message to the campus staff. We absolutely recognize how overwhelming this is. Being instructed from home in a fully online platform is an option. And if 100% of the parents selected that option, we would rise to that level and be able to provide that service. We want each family member in our district to know that how they are concerned for their child is how we will respond to the services that they want. And that is the premise behind having our administrators, campus administrators, form a team to call each parent. That's a huge undertaking, but it's a very important undertaking because, again, we want parents to know that we're opening school because we have to live with this pandemic, but we're going to do it in such a way that everybody feels comfortable about it. Yes, there are going to be some limits, but everybody has a choice about being schooled from home or being schooled at school. Now, having said that, I've talked to numerous people between the weekend and today, and it just seems like secondary parents are indicating that their kids are going to come to school. Well, we have to be ready for that. We may not necessarily agree with it, but that's why we have to have that different start times to have less kids at school at one time. And it's difficult, but if 100% of the parents wanted to get school from home, we would be ready to provide learning in that method. We recognize how difficult this is.
Other questions? I'm going to follow up on something that Amy said. Having been in different campuses and different buildings, and we have some of the students that are self-contained that have some kind of disability, and they're not going to be able to keep a face covering, such as a mask. Are other opportunities, such as probably a face shield, going to be available for them?
Yes, Mr. Mesa, particularly maybe for students at the pre-K level, that certainly would be an option, but I know that we've already, Ms. Hernandez provided some masks that she found at a local drugstore, and then Mr. Maldonado, Chief Maldonado, got us a number to order some of those similar masks online. So we'll be prepared for different scenarios. That's certainly one of them.
Yes, because I've been to some classrooms where they're not going to be able to have something right next to their mouth and keep that throughout the day. So I'm just hoping that there's going to be other options for them to be safe, and of course to keep the staff safe as well.
Yes,
Anyone else? No questions? Well, I guess we want to make sure that those options are well articulated and well posted somewhere so that parents will follow through in choosing something that once they receive that call.
And again, we're going to move forward because that's the guidance that we've gotten from the state. But if things were to change, then we would certainly very quickly respond to that. I can't just overemphasize my agreement with Ms. Haynes. These are very difficult and trying times. And in advance, I thank all the teachers and principals and counselors that are going to help implement this plan, because it is going to be just a whole lot of intensive work to prepare every facet of it, from the training to the implementation. So thank you so much in advance. We know that everybody will bring their best to make all of this work.
And I know that the best way to make it work is to make sure that we discuss and ask questions and point out those areas that might be somewhat questionable, and So I appreciate everyone, uh, their input and their questions. It's something that is going to be ever changing up until the start of the school year.
Yeah. If I may, Mr. Massa, just because I know that there's some teachers watching, and our goal is just to have teachers be dedicated to any one of the options. So obviously, if you're doing fully online, those teachers and those grade levels would be fully online, and they would work towards that preparation. If you're a hybrid teacher, then you know that's all you would be doing. And then if you're a classroom teacher, then you would do that on the 22-to-1. And I imagine that that each one of those is going to have just a whole lot of work required around it. But your principals, once they find out through calling the parents how many of each are required, that's when they'll start deciding who's going to be option A, B, or C type of teacher. So we ask for your patience as your principals make those contacts to all the parents to make those determinations.
I guess the difficult part for me to understand, Dr. Rios, is that there's a supervising parent at home for 4 hours, because most everybody works. So we'll see.
If you recall, Mr. Mesa, when we did that survey of the parents a few weeks ago, a large number of elementary students indicated that they would have a parent supervising at home and that there was their option. So it's definitely not going to be everybody, but it's certainly going to be some of them. I'll be quick to report to the board once every principal reports how many kids per grade level per option.
Thank you for that report. Anyone else? Because we have no further questions. So again, thank you. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Next item that we have on our agenda is business and finance. Item 14A, consideration to approve contract over $5,000 with Fry Ed Technology in the amount of $14,075. Funding source, Title V, Part A, Student Support Academic Grant, Fund 289, for Google Classroom Platform and Training, Ida Gomez.
Good evening, President Mesa, members to the board, and Dr. Rios. The instructional committee that met with the elementary and the secondary teams has finalized their recommendations. Tonight, we bring before you the contract for elementary, the Google Classroom, and the Google Suite. Their partner in education is Fry Ed Technology. They're the ones that will provide the training. Fry Ed Technology is a Google for Education partner that provides technology integration, staff development. The technology integration is the connection between the content that students are learning and the technology system and equipment available for that learning. They will provide training services for all educators around the G Suite for education and any blended learning needs for the district. All teachers will gain access to Google Classroom 5, learn strategies and skills for creating engaging assignments through screencasting. In addition, teachers will learn to utilize Google Meets for a safe and secure learning platform. Finally, Fry Ed Technology will conduct a facilitated online learning experience where teachers can dive into creating engaging assignments in the Google Classroom using G Suite for Education apps and tools. I did include a copy of the contract in the packet, but at this time, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Question from board members? I hear none. Recommendation, please.
Yes, sir. It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve for the superintendent to sign a contract with Fry Ed Technology a Google and Education partner in the amount of $14,075.
You've heard the recommendation from the administration. Is there a motion for approval? Motion was made by Gana Gonzalez, seconded by Fred Contreras. All those in agreement, please raise your hand. Mr. Contreras? In agreement? I'm in agreement. Amy Haynes? In agreement. Ms. Gonzalez? Four, and Mr. Orfeld? Motion is approved by a unanimous 5 votes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa.
Item 14B, consideration to approve contract over $5,000 with purchase order over $25,000 with Instructure for Canvas technology integration in the amount of $65,331.81. Funding source is Title 5, Part A, Student Support Academic Program Fund 289 for Secondary Campus Technology Implementation. Item Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. The Secondary Teacher Committee finalized their recommendation for their Canvas platform. Again, these were 6th through 12th grade teacher representatives. The support system for Canvas is Instructure. It is a company that will provide the 4 components for teacher support and access, to include the Canvas subscription. That would allow teachers unlimited access to over 40 unique live webinars over a 12-month period. This is actually where they log in and navigate through their courses. In addition, the adoption consulting. This will help the teachers to increase their platform adoption for student engagement. And this is actually where the best instructional practices come through. The custom webinars and the Canvas support. So the entire package will support the teachers in their remote learning and their classroom learning, and of course the students through the staff development that would come with this platform. Like the elementary, Mr. Mesa, the contract was included in the packet, but if there are any questions, I can answer them, sir.
There is a big difference in cost from elementary to secondary. It's my understanding that all these are webinars for training.
No, sir, some of it can be face-to-face, and some of it is webinar. Mr. Mesa, the difference in cost is that this district already has Google licenses. We've had those for years, and here we would actually be purchasing the Canvas licenses.
Okay. Questions from board members? Anyone? I was reading that they have unlimited access to 40 live webinars. So that would be for the training for the teachers.
Yes, sir. And they're also a 24/7 operation, 7 days a week. The research actually shows that most of their calls come in after hours, when the teachers are working on the weekends or the evenings, and they are available 24/7 to our teachers. That was the choice that we're making for them.
Mr. Orfeld, are you familiar with the Canvas technology platform?
Yes, sir. It is the learning management system, or LMS, that we use at Southwest Texas Junior College. We picked it up about 2 years ago to replace what was known as Campus Cruiser. I went through all of us had to go through the training. I was one of the ones that kind of beta tested or was one of the first at the Del Real campus to use it, and then others came on after. Everything I did for the training was online. They had modules that you had to go in and complete in order to be quote unquote certified to use it. That way you understood all the different functionality of the system. So I've been using it for my classes the last 2+ years. It's a system I'm currently using right now for my online and hybrid and remote that we had to do in the spring. So it's got it's a easy integration. There, it's an easy layout. Once you go through the training, it'll it comes across easy to go in and use. A lot of our dual credit students at the ECHS are already using it because of taking classes with SWTJC. So I think it'll be a good fit for the district, and anyone's welcome to reach out to me also if they have any questions about any of the teachers or stuff. I can help walk through and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? If not, recommendation, please.
Yes, sir. It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve for the superintendent to sign the contract with Instructure Canvas Technology Integration and approve a purchase order in the amount of $65,331.81.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, seconded by Amy Haynes. All those in favor? Mr. Contreras? In favor. Myself in favor. Amy Haynes? In favor. Diana Gonzalez? In favor. Mr. Overfeld? Motion is approved unanimously with 5 votes.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa.
Thank you. The time is 7:46 p.m. We're going to go into closed section permitted by sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.073, 551.074, 551.076, 551.082, 551.084, and 551.087 of the Government Code Texas Open Meetings Act. If a final vote is required on any item discussed in closed session, it shall be taken upon reconvening into open session. We're now in closed session. Okay, the time is 8:30. We're going to reconvene into open session. No action was taken in executive session. We're down to item 19 on your agenda. 19A, consideration to approve the personnel report to include the following: new hires, district vacancies, retirements, resignations. Idea Garcia.
Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, members of the board. It is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve the following new personnel. For Del Rio Middle School 7th grade social studies teacher, Mr. Gilbert Polanco. For Del Rio Middle School 8th grade social studies teacher, Joanna Zamora. Assistant Band Director for Del Rio High School, Juan Ramirez. And CTE Law Enforcement Teacher for Del Rio High School, Mark Guerra.
With the recommendation from administration, is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, seconded by Diana Gonzalez. All those in favor? Mr. Contreras, in favor. Myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez, in favor. Amy Haynes, in favor. Mr. Overfeld, in favor. Motion is carried unanimously by 5 votes, 5 affirmative votes. There being no other items on the agenda, is there a motion for adjournment? Motion made by Mr. Overfeld, I believe, and seconded by Mr. Contreras. Amy, seconded by Amy. I'm sorry, I was looking down. Before I do adjourn, Dr. Rios, you don't have any reports at all.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, there's been a motion to adjourn and a second by Amy, motion made by Mr. Overfeld. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor, myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez, in favor. Amy Haynes, and Mr. Overfeld. Motion carries now. Good night, everyone.